A good Erev Shabbos, Parshas Va'era. Before our Torah, first of all, I'd like to thank Mark and Debbie Jacob for sponsoring Shal Shudas this week virtually, and also Abbas Subanim this week in memory of Mark's father, Leslie Jacob David Ben Shimon, whose yahrzeit is coming up this Friday. May his neshama have an aliyah from this Dvar Torah, from your tzedakah, and all of the learning that will happen at Abbas Subanim. And he certainly already has an aliyah from the beautiful lives that you and your family live. There is a very famous question on this week's Parsha. Moshe Rabbeinu goes to Klal Yisrael, and he tells them, time for the Gula has come. They don't listen. Because Baruch Hu tells Moshe, go tell Pare. Moshe makes a kal v'chaimer. Moshe says, 1 second, I went to the Jewish people. They're not listening to me. How's Pare going to listen? Famous question is, what do you mean? The pasuk tells us directly, you know why Klal Yisrael didn't listen to Moshe Rabbeinu? Because they were under such stress, such anxiety, they didn't have the headspace to listen to Moshe Rabbeinu. But Paro was not under stress. He wasn't working hard, so he would listen. Perhaps he would listen. What's this kal v'chaimer of Moshe Rabbeinu? That's the famous question. There's various answers given. I'd like to give an answer that I saw recently from Rav Binyamin Cohen Shlita of the Mir Yeshiva. A beautiful answer from the Bali Musar. The Bali Musar teach us the following. There are two primary areas that cause a person to not be able to think clearly and properly. One is when we're under stress. That's where Klal Yisrael was holding. They couldn't breathe. They didn't have the headspace. Moshe, what are you talking about? We don't have time for this. Paro, you know what his life was full of? Gaiva, arrogance, and taiva, and desire, lust. When a person is involved in taivas, when a person is involved in desires and lust, they can't think clearly either. Anxiety causes a person to not allow their heart to be inclined to the Dvar Hashem. That's what we were going through as Klal Yisrael. But you know something? Paro was really in the same boat. Even though he wasn't working hard and he didn't have shortness of breath, he couldn't think. He was so caught up in himself and his own personal needs and desires. He had the same kotzer ruach from the avoda kasha, from the harsh work of being a Baal Taiva, of being a person who's full of desires. Both of them, therefore, did not have the capabilities. If Klal Yisrael, says Moshe Rabbeinu, if Klal Yisrael, who's under the stress, is not listening to the Dvar Hashem, certainly Paro is not going to listen either. He's under the same thing. Except Klal Yisrael is working hard, and Paro is full of desires, and he doesn't have the expansive mind to be able to incline his heart to the Dvar Hashem. This idea holds true with us. When a person is under stress, when a person has anxiety, when a person's mind is filled up, it's very, very hard to listen to the Dvar Hashem. It's very hard to really clear our minds and focus in on as to what does Hashem really want from me. So what's the Eitzah? How can we fix this up if and when we're in stages where we fall into this? The answer is, the Mishnah in Avos tells us, Ein lecha ben chayrin ala misha isik b'Torah. Who's free? A person who involves themselves in Torah. If we set aside time daily to study Torah, to contemplate the Dvar Hashem, to think about the Dvar Hashem, that all of a sudden frees us up, even if there's stress in our lives, even when there's things going on that is really should be taking up our mind. But when a person ensures that there's words of Torah going into their minds daily, it expands our hearts, it expands our minds, it allows us to think through concepts and topics and ideas in a much clearer fashion, thereby alleviating the kaitzer ruach me'avoda kasha, the stress that does not allow us to think clearly, and opens us up to hear the Dvar Hashem, to constantly come closer to the word of Hashem. Have a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos.